Ago Midasi, West African Fonte. Just may we have your attention, please, and thank you very much. Welcome, happy Sunday. Hope everybody is arriving or already at your highest levels of mental, physical, and spiritual health in the most positive way imaginable. We are really happy to have you here with us, whether you're on the Zoom platform or Facebook or YouTube. Happy to have you as we talk today about how to be the best accomplice against patriarchy. So welcome to everybody for coming in today. Hope everyone again is well. And we will start as we always do by acknowledging the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And just so we are absolutely clear, in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, when we say indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, we are talking about the American Indian movement, or I'm sorry, the American Indian people and all of their descendants. We are not talking about anybody else who wants to claim some fantasy, romantic, made up lineage to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, usually because those folks doing that have not taken the time to learn their history. So we're not talking about fantasy. We're talking about the people whose land this was stolen. We acknowledge them and their fight to regain their land back. We stand with them 100% on that, especially as we move into this next week where the highest level imperialist holiday is in existence, the 4th of July, where they want to tell you that this country represents freedom and democracy. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe that when that's like the biggest fantasy there is. So we don't want to disrespect justice. So we acknowledge the indigenous people. They're still here in many different forms, and this is their land. And we stand with them in their fight to get their land back. And of course, along with that, we always acknowledge our African ancestors who fought relentlessly for us to exist today in 2021 and beyond. And one very important African proverb is that the greatest sin is to be ungrateful. And so we would never be ungrateful to our African ancestors. They are the very reason that we are still here to breathe air and exist today. They fought relentlessly for us. Don't believe bourgeois lies that are presented to you that they didn't fight. Anybody telling you that has not studied African history. And if you believe it, what's the old saying? It's not the fool, but the fool who follows. So, we got to know our history, and our history is one of struggle and resistance against oppression every step of the way. And our African ancestors did that. And if we want to honor their legacy, we will continue to do that today. There was an outstanding tribute to Kwame Ture this morning here where I am. It was this morning on the west coast of the plantation, the United Snakes, done on Black Power Media. Got a chance to watch many of my All African People's Revolutionary and Shukura's Revolutionary Party comrades at home throughout the African continent, in Europe, and here in the United Snakes of America, talking about Kwame Ture's legacy. And what it reinforced for me is that I have a responsibility to honor that legacy by continuing to do my absolute best to fulfill it. And that, my friends and enemies, is exactly what we intend to do. So we are so glad that you are here with us today for this, again, very critical topic. And we will get started with our introductions to get us underway so that we can talk about how to be the best accomplice against patriarchy. And we start as we always do. My name is Ahjamu Umi, longtime organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, proud organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, 37 years plus, and will continue to do so for as long as I'm living. I've done that work all over the world and will continue to do that as long as I'm able, and just proud to be a part of an organization that stands for truth and justice and is not afraid to stand for those things regardless of the consequences. And joining me is my outstanding and amazing daughter, Shukura Umi, who grew up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute and now is finishing up her doctorate degree. As I've said many times, because I'm a proud papa, she will be the very first person in our family to ever achieve that objective. So just really proud of her. And she is studying communication public health. She's very active in the All African People's Revolutionary Party work study process, and just proud to be able to share this space with her every Sunday, where we make our most earnest attempt to bring truth to power. So glad to be here with Shukura. And again, going back to the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or APRP, our objective, you all, is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. Or as Kwame Nkrumah said, until Africa is free, no African anywhere on earth will be free. And so you see the logos to the right, those are Pan-African formations on the ground. If you watch the tribute, and if you didn't watch it, you should. I don't know what y'all watching if you're not watching this stuff, because this is the best stuff being produced out there, but you should watch it on Black Power Media. You saw comrades from the Democratic Party of Guinea, of which Kwame Ture was also a Central Committee member of, as well as the APRP. You saw comrades from the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau in the broadcast today, PAIGC, which is another sister party. So yeah, I mean, this is the work that we're doing to create one worldwide fighting force for revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And of course, we have chapters everywhere on earth, everywhere African people live. We do work. And we also have strong relationships with other movements that are fighting against the same enemies that we're fighting against. And I actually had the honor this week, at the request of some of our wonderful Filipino comrades, to write or to actually do a video, a solidarity video, for some outstanding work that they continue to do. And this is who we are, you all. We're trying to build a worldwide network of people who want to overthrow these thugs and creeps and bring in justice for the masses of people on the planet Earth. That's what we want to do. And obviously, patriarchy is a major obstacle to that. So that's why we're here talking about that today. And to get us started, I'm going to turn it right over to Shukura.
Good afternoon, good day. Hello to everyone out there. I second everything my dad said. We really hope that you all are in good spirits. And also, just thank you for continuing to join us. I think this is probably going on week 70, I think, by now, Daddy, that we've been doing this. So, there's so many different ways that you could be spending your time. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that. And we're grateful because we hope that not only are you taking something away from it in this hour of time, but you're also inviting people and, sharing the information, discussing it, bringing it up in different spaces that you find yourself in, so that the information can continue to snowball, if you will, or replicate, depending on who it is that's sharing it. So we're thankful for that, but we also just want to make sure that it's reaching as many people as possible. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second, about how we need as many hands on deck as possible. Capitalism effectively oppresses all of humanity by sustaining a system of hierarchical oppression. So, super rich Europeans are on top, and other people who represent the interests of the first group can also exist on top. This is what we call the international bourgeoisie class. White supremacy operates the same way patriarchy does, by infecting the institutions, values, ideas, and practices of every facet of the society. So patriarchy isn't just defined as a man taking oppressive actions against woman or women. It is also the system that shapes our consciousness and actions, so that women identifying and non binary people also perpetuate patriarchy, just like colonized people carry out the whims of white supremacy under capitalism. Regarding gender, we will say that the gender historically in Africa and around the world has taken many forms. The European, Judeo Christian, and the Islamic interpretation of a two gender system is a socialization that has been imposed upon society and does not reflect the actual history of Africa and humanity. So the concept of men, women, and people who do not, excuse me, people who are not accepting of either assigned gender, those are all valid manifestations of human existence, but they don't reflect African culture. This is based on European ethnocentric ideas. This is the danger in only seeing things from an individualistic Western standpoint. Because you see, living in America has caused us to only think of things from the perspective of the binary approach and based on our socializations that were introduced by Europeans many, many moons ago. And since we use this training, we need to understand that we need to actually work on erasing that. We need to understand that this training that we have been socialized to think about is the same thing that is causing us to dehumanize one another. It's the same thing that's causing us to negate one another. And it's the same thing that is causing us to dismiss each other because we don't, quote unquote, agree with how they identify or they represent themselves. When in actuality, each of us contributes in a different way. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. I just want you to think for a moment. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Never in history. I challenge you to put it in the chat or put it on Facebook. Never in history has anyone been able to make progress without collectively coming together with other human beings and working together to fight. In my work study, we are reading Ghana, Autobiography of Kwame Nkrumah, and he actually gives an analogy that I think is very, very appropriate to share with you all today. I believe it's roughly in about maybe chapter 9 or 10, where he's talking about a long day that he's had because he's just won the presidency of, at that time, called the Gold Coast. It was not independent and known as Ghana yet, but he was working on the independence with his colleagues and board members. And so he's sitting on his porch and he's watching these ants that are walking by as he's eating his fish stew. And I just would have loved to be humbled enough to have met Kwame Nkrumah because he really just seems like a very dope person, if you understand what I'm saying. So he's eating his fish stew and he's saying, ants. They are never not organized. Ants never lose passengers on their trail of where they're going, and they don't have stragglers. Ants are determined, they are disciplined, and they know what they are after, and they will find a way to achieve it because they understand the importance of working together. That's literally all they are made to do, is rely on one another so that no task could be too big for them because they understand as long as they have each other and as long as they have the strength to literally carry that piece of cherry or carry that cashew nut or whatever it is that they're trying to get back to their anthill, they're going to do it by any means necessary. And he literally writes about this in his book, which I think contributed to how he was starting to think about how we can't just organize in Africa. We can't just organize in Miami. We can't just organize in Jamaica. We need to organize Africans everywhere. We cannot leave anyone out of that because we need everyone. And so that's the example that he gives. And I encourage you not just to think about insects, but let's think about other animals who work together collectively. We need to learn from the other species and stop being humanist species, if you will, and specious, and only thinking that humans are the only ones who have the answers. There are animals out there, a pride of lions, for example, a pack of wolves, or even elephants who intentionally operate from a familial standpoint because they understand that they cannot exist without the other five of them or without the other six of them. They don't go other places without one another. They have each other's back. And they understand that whatever it is they're trying to achieve, they're going to do it as long as they collectively work together to do that. And if you need human examples, let's think of the people in the Congo. Think of the people in Azania. We just gave you examples about how Ghana reached this independence. That didn't happen overnight. That was because people fought for that. People worked towards it. People kept agitating systems of power to make that be a reality. And if you need American examples, the civil rights was one of the best examples we can think about of people coming together and pushing against systems of oppression. So all of these examples are of people and animals coming together to fight. And when we think about Africans, we need to think about the fact that many Africans are fighting for us to have our land back. Why is that important? That's important because land equals power. We need to collectively join that fight so that Africans can be free. For you see, once Africa is no longer exploited, then the African people will start to experience respect since Africa is being respected. Next slide. Men often say things like, quote, I've had a strong mother, so there was no patriarchy in my upbringing, end quote. But this is objectively never true. The dominant society is patriarchal. So this means that no matter how strong your mother, sister, etc., they will never be able to overcome the institutionalization of patriarchy that dominates every piece of education in this world today. Every faith practice in this world today is impacted by the socializations of patriarchy. Every workplace environment impacted by the socializations of patriarchy. Every social environment impacted by the socializations of patriarchy. You cannot define patriarchy through individualism no more than you can define white supremacy simply through individual experiences. Now, I ask you all a question. Does white supremacy simply affect people of color? No. White supremacy affects Europeans just as much as it affects people of color. Thus, who does patriarchy affect? Non male people, yes. Women identifying people, yes. Non binary people, yes. But did you include male identifying people in your response? You should have, because patriarchy affects them just as much as it does non male people. What has patriarchy brought us? Let's unpack that a little bit. Like, let's actually think about why patriarchy is a good system, right? I challenge you again to give me an example of how this has helped us at all. Okay. I can give you some negative examples of how it has drawn us farther behind. I can mention to you that I see no benefits to the madness of patriarchy. I see more corrupted relationships because of patriarchy. I see disrespect for humanity. I see lack of self efficacy and lack of self esteem. I see insecurity among people, stark and serious mental health issues among people. I see anger in myself when I think about patriarchy and how oppressive it can be for me. I see self depreciation among people because of patriarchy. I see people compromising their values because of patriarchy. And I see biopsychosocial issues that are stemming from patriarchy. I personally do not want to raise my child where they would be even remotely exposed to something like that, because that means that my child is going to adopt all of those same negativities that I just shared with you. And that scares the heck out of me. So we have to think about our future generations, and we really have to unpack why is it a good thing. We have to remember that rocking the boat is not a bad thing. When you become critical of things and you start asking more questions, that's when we actually start to get to the root, because that means you are challenging the status quo and challenging all of those socializations that we just talked about that are not based on humanistic principles. And unfortunately, for the most part, you can almost assume that everything you've been taught, especially if you were educated in the US, is not based on something that's going to value humanity. So, because of that, just make the assumption that you should challenge everything. Challenge why America reached its independence in 1776. Challenge that. Challenge why people in the Congo are fighting. They're fighting because colonists are still there today trying to take their land. That's why they're still fighting. Challenge, what does neocolonialism mean? Challenge that. Do some research, look it up. And as I said, have conversations with other people about it. Don't just find the information and then keep it with you, because that's not going to make the change that we need to make. We need to collectively have as many conversations as possible so that we can literally lift the cobwebs out of our brains, for lack of a better term, because capitalism has been socializing us for years, decades, and to some of us, even centuries, if we are blessed to live that long. So we need to understand there's a lot of unlearning that we need to do. And it starts with us having conversations like this and rocking the boat. So again, I ask you, what has patriarchy brought us? And if you can't think of anything positive, then that means we're on the right track of understanding why it needs to go. Patriarchy is a system that puts gigantic pressure on male identifying people to exist and rule, when, as I previously stated, no power can be obtained unless Africans get their land back. So can male identifying people get it back by themselves? Absolutely not. That's absurd. No, we all need to work together, just like the ants Kwame Nkrumah mentioned. This means understanding that each person is needed for the revolution. So if you think that you are in a position to critique someone else because they are quote unquote not representing in a way that you need them to represent, even though they are fighting side by side with you to get Africa free, you have no right to do that, because there's no hierarchy when you're fighting to get your land back because you are African. There's no stark value that you're more important than anybody else. We all contribute to getting Africa back because Africa belongs to any African who understands that that is their home. So when we think about that, we have to make sure that we understand the more hands we have, the more collective learning, the more collective learning we can do from the past and current events so that we can engage in political education. We can work with comrades at home, Africa. We can also work with comrades in Cuba and other countries that are fighting to help support us so we can get our land back. And that means we also need to help them and support them to get their land back too. Thank you all so much. And let's smash patriarchy.
Smash patriarchy. Thank you, Shukura. And I just want to, we didn't define patriarchy because we've done workshops that were specifically around the definition and the manifestations. But just to help, I will read the definition that I included in my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. And on page 5, I define patriarchy as a system of institutionalized discrimination against women, identifying persons, and all persons who do not function as men in society. A system of institutionalized discrimination against women, identifying persons, and all persons who do not function as men in society. And so what we're saying is that we are 100% opposed to patriarchy as a system. We want to see it destroyed. We don't believe that you can be a person who supports patriarchy and out of one side of your mouth and on the other side of your mouth claim to represent justice. It's just not possible. It's just a contradiction. In order for you to represent justice, you have to be opposed to patriarchy. And I have the picture there on the left. I took that picture, I don't know, it was about 2 years ago now. But I have it on there because I cannot even tell you all how much vitriol I have received from people for taking that picture. If you can't read it, it says, it's a pledge. My name is Ahjamu Umi, and I commit to call out transphobia and trans misogyny because I love and support African trans women. And so I honestly, you all, I simply cannot understand what it is anyone would have a problem with that statement about. But apparently a lot of people do, because I get tons of hate for it from people I don't know, people behind internet keyboards. I say that because they wouldn't dare say it to my face, but people who, feel like they have some courage behind a screen. And so, they call me all kind of patriarchal names because I had this poster. And I'm just here to say I'm proud to hold that poster. I don't know where the poster is today, but I would make another one and hold it today. And I hope if it upsets people, I hope you have a heart attack from being so upset behind it. Because the thing that we have to come to understand, and I'll talk about this more in depth in just a second, is that you cannot be, as Dr. King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You cannot refute that principle. It is not possible for you to say, oh, that's not a true statement. And what he meant by that is that you can't say, well, I'm against oppression against me, but I don't care about oppression against other people. If somebody's gay or transgender, I don't care about that oppression. I just care about it against me. That's a contradiction. And if there's no middle ground, because it's a principle. And with a principle, there's never any middle ground. It's either one thing or another. You can't say, well, I believe that people are always more important than money, but I'm going to sell this person out tomorrow to make some money. I'm just going to do that tomorrow. Then I'll go back to believing people are more important than money. No, once you do that tomorrow, you have demonstrated that you don't, it's not a principle with you. You can't say, if you say, I believe in God, whether you call God Jesus, Jehovah, Allah, Yahweh, Jah Rastafarian, whatever way you identify with God, you can't say today, well, I believe in God, and then tomorrow, you know what? I don't know. I'm not going to follow that today because I don't really feel like I believe. And then Tuesday, yeah, I believe again. No, once you said what you said tomorrow, you don't believe in God. You violated that principle. So this is a principle here. When we say you cannot be against injustice in one place and not care about it or actively work to perpetuate it in another place. That means that you don't really care about justice. That's what I'm getting from that. And when I see that, what the way I view people from that point forward is that they really don't care about justice for humanity because they've already exposed themselves as not caring about injustice against a certain segment of humanity. They only care about justice for themselves, which means they really don't care about justice. They just care about advancing themselves. So this is something that we cannot escape. It's irrefutable. And then also, you know, with this question of patriarchy, especially as it relates to men and how men relate to women, how men relate to women identifying people, how men relate to people that don't claim a gender, as Shukura said. This concept, this belief that I have to be opposed to any discussion about this because deep down inside, I feel like when we talk about this, my oppression is going to be now dismissed and ignored. Now, we have to say, like, that's understandable on a surface level, why people would feel that way. For example, African women, for example, it's understandable. I understand why an African cisgendered or heterosexual, whatever you want to call it, woman, when you come to this woman and you say, well, what about trans women? I conceptualize why that first African woman would have some issue with discussing that, because oppression against all women is not recognized and acknowledged in this society. But what we're arguing here is that we have to be willing to rise to the next level. Yes, your oppression is not being acknowledged. The oppression I experience as an African man is not acknowledged. You know, there's no love for African men anywhere. You know, I understand that feeling. That doesn't exist. You know, I live my life being engaged every day based on the crimes of other men. You know, men abuse women. Men are not trustworthy. Fathers are not trustworthy. So the kids raise up and they don't trust men. And then I come in contact with these people and they feel a certain way about me. They don't even know me. So I get it. I understand that. That's marginalizing me. And I haven't done any of those things to anybody. So I understand how someone could feel that way. But what I've tried to do with my life is push myself to not center myself when that happens. I come in contact with African people who are all types of people. And whatever way that the people come into the room, a lot of times they have issues with cisgendered heterosexual men for good reason. And I'm the cisgendered heterosexual man standing there in front of them. So they direct that attitude towards me. That happens to me all the time, you all. But what I've been able to learn how to do is not center myself in that. They don't even know me. It's not about me. So I don't need to take that like, well, they're against me, so I'm not gonna deal with them. No, that's a childish response to that. Instead, what I do is tell myself, like, this person, what's happening is they are processing their trauma, and I'm a symbol of their trauma. It has nothing to do with me. So there's no reason for me to have to take it personally. And being able to do that, it's not been easy, but it certainly made me a stronger person. And that's always my objective, is to get stronger. So my point that I'm making here is that when people have this fear of losing something that's driving their ability to be able to think clearly about these issues, that's a problem that you need to work through. You should not be satisfied to be at that place and stay there. That's a problem that we need to work through, because the only way that we're ever going to have unity is when we are all prepared to accept that the definition of unity is having a common objective with people that you don't agree with everything with, but you agree that all of your circumstances will move forward once you come together. That's what unity is. That unity is nothing else except that. Unity is not, well, as long as you agree with me, we're unified. That's a backward, dysfunctional definition of unity. And every African and every oppressed person, we shouldn't even have to have this conversation. All the hell that we experience every day, we shouldn't have to have that conversation. We should be 100% clear about that. I always use the example of the comedian. I don't remember her name. She was a young European woman. I went to see her at Lake Tahoe once. And she said, I love minorities. I love people of color, as long as they act white. And I never forgot that. That was like 20 years ago, but I never forgot that, because that right there is a perfect example of how a lot of people think. Oh, I don't have anything against anybody. I accept everybody. But really, what they're really operating on is, I accept everybody as long as they live and exist the way I expect people to live and exist. Then I accept them. The minute they fall outside of that realm, then I got a problem with them, and I don't want to deal with them. So that's something that, we have to really, we have to really struggle with. And because this hesitancy that people have to discuss these questions that we're discussing today, they're based in this scarcity culture. And capitalism is all about scarcity culture. And if you pay attention, you hear scarcity culture all the time. There's not enough. Like this whole argument that, well, there's not enough food to feed people on earth. That's a scarcity argument, you all, and it's not based in reality at all. It's based in a fear-based concept that we have to hoard something because there's not enough for everybody to have everything they need to survive, exist, and develop. I mean, anybody that says there's not enough food to feed people in the world, I'm sorry, but you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And you should stop talking and get some information in your head. Because we know one of the reasons that we fight for Pan-Africanism is we know that there are 600 million hectares of arable land. That's arable land is land that you grow food on, that are not even being utilized in Africa. And if you want to be able to understand how to contextualize that, I live in Sacramento, California, here in the United Snakes of America. And Sacramento, California is here with the San Joaquin Valley. And the San Joaquin Valley is one of the 5 top food producing regions in the entire earth. I can guarantee you, if you have drank wine, if you have eaten fruits or vegetables, if you have done any of that, you've eaten something that was grown right here where I live. I don't care where you are on earth. That's true. And the San Joaquin Valley is only 50,000 hectares of land. So how the hell, if you hear that, how the hell can you believe that 50,000 hectares of arable land can be one of the top food producing regions on the entire planet? And we have 600 million hectares of arable land in Africa that aren't even being used, but there's not enough food on earth to feed everybody. You're out of your mind if you believe that. There's no reason to believe scarcity culture. There is enough for, I don't even believe, like people say, there's only 12 years left before the earth explodes. Well, if you believe that, you might as well just kill yourself. Even if that's true, I'm not the kind of, I can't live my life in a way so that I have to believe something like that. I have to believe, because I'm a dialectical and historical materialist, that if there was a way to get us in this situation, there has to be a way to get us out. I have to believe that. And my experiences in life, based on having that philosophy and not being somebody that's swayed by nonsense and nonsensical people around me, has proven to me that that's the correct approach. And it's done that because I've been able to see problems solved once we put ourselves together and decide that we're going to solve them. So I'm saying about this question of patriarchy is that we can bring people together And we can solve all the problems of oppression that exist in the world, and nobody has to lose anything. In fact, everybody's going to gain something because there's enough to go around. There's no scarcity of freedom. The only scarcity is that not enough of us have freedom. And so we think that based on the capitalist model of scarcity, that our road to freedom means denying it to someone else because there's not enough to go around. And what we're saying is that's nonsense. That's the logic of the enemy. And we're not here to perpetuate the logic of the enemy. We're here to perpetuate the logic of justice, you all. And so a true advocate for justice has to take positions for justice on every issue all the time. You can't not do it when it's going to cause discomfort for you. Then you don't believe in justice. You can't not do it when it means that you have to take a position that's unpopular. Then you don't believe in justice if that's what you do. You can't not do it when it means that you're going to take a position that's going to require you to be out there exposed. Then you don't believe in justice if that's how you function. Justice requires courage, you all. And courage means you are going to stand for what's right no matter what they do to you, no matter what people say about you, no matter how many ignorant, negative, and reactionary comments they send you on social media. So what? They send that stuff to me. They don't know me. They wouldn't say it to me to my face. There's one guy was telling me, he's an African man. He's telling me, if I saw you, I would knock you out. And I said, well, I can give you any place where we can meet and you can take your best shot. But you better be prepared, because if you don't make that one shot count, you are going to have a bad rest of your day, partner. And of course, I never heard from him because there's no courage in that. No courage in that. Why would you threaten somebody you don't even know based on a position you don't even understand? Only a fool does that. So we just have to, on this question, get so much better, you all. We have to get so much better. And that better comes in us learning how not to center ourselves, but understand that the more we liberate humanity, the better in position it places each of us, the more we're able to forward progress. I saw a saying, a Chinese proverb. I don't agree with it completely, but it had a lot of sense to it. It said that, the underdeveloped person is the person that blames everybody else. A person that has developed some is someone who just blames themselves. And the most developed person is the person who doesn't blame anybody. And the only part about that I don't agree with is that capitalism needs to be blamed. There's no question about that. It's an oppressive system. So I can't just not blame anybody. That doesn't make any sense to me. And that proverb was probably existed before we had capitalist oppression. So that's why they probably made it. But my point is that there is no benefit to me in my eyes for women to be oppressed. I don't need to advance through benefiting from the oppression of women. I could advance with everybody there. That's how much I believe in myself. I don't need a system that holds people back in order for me to move forward. And the problem with many Europeans today is that they're reliant on these systems of oppression. There's another saying I saw. It said the reason why white men are so mad is because they've had 500 years of head start and they're still no farther ahead than us. Well, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. So you got to stand against justice just because you're mediocre. Step up your game. And if everybody's free, you have to step up your game. That's what you need to do. So that's what we're talking about here. And we understand that people get offended when we talk like this. And I hope if you're offended, then I hope the rest of your day is ruined. The rest of your week, the rest of your life is ruined. Because it should be, if you're relying on these systems of oppression to bolster you up. That's a really backward way to live. We got to have a process where everybody becomes free. That's the only thing that we're interested in. And so being an accomplice to oppression against women identifying people, non-gender binary people, all the people who are adversely impacted by patriarchy is so important. And I just want to stop for a second. There's some wonderful comments here. Our comrade my comrade, our comrade, Erica from Hood Communists and Black Alliance for Peace made a note about Gerald Home, giving us some good education about what July 4th is about. You should check that out. Gerald Horn, author of many outstanding books, of which I've been able to read several of them. Yeah, we need to stop this nonsense about July 4th. I mean, give me a break. That's a day of mourning. It's a day of slavery. Every year, I have a shirt I've had 20 years. It says African in America with 3 Ks, and America is spelled with a small a. And I wear that every July 4th. I make sure it's clean so I can wear it. I'll be wearing it. I'll be out of town. I'll be at the hot springs, nothing but Europeans, and I'll be wearing that shirt because we need to expose that. And then our comrade Meko from the American Indian Movement has said Africa is the largest wild herbs of herbivores on the planet. Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. That's very good to know. Not surprising, very good to know. But why is it being an accomplice work against patriarchy so critical to our overall victory? And I think this is the part we have to really understand. This will help us get closer to victory to do this. And the reason why it will is that we have to understand that capitalism operates through a system of hierarchy of oppression. The way class struggle operates and the way class structures operate is turning oppressed people against one another. That's how it does that. So that's why they've always been able to make white working class people the foot soldiers for white supremacy. They were like that during slavery. Even though they couldn't afford to own slaves, they still supported the institution of slavery. During Jim Crow, they were like that. That's who formed the nucleus of the Ku Klux Klan and all the White Citizens Council, all the white supremacist groups. And they still remain that to this day. White working class people are the backbone of white supremacy because that's how capitalism works. It turns oppressed people against one another. And it turns men against women and men against women identifying people, men against non-gender binary people, making us believe that, well, if we support these folks reaching their full potential, it's going to take something from us. Again, this scarcity model that we've been trained to believe is the only option in the world. And so we support this kind of stuff. So that's how the system operates. And if we ditch that backward philosophy and we come to the realization that unity does nothing to weaken you as an individual and your standing as a human being. This is the part that we really have to figure out how to dig deep. And I have this discussion all the time with people, and no one ever has an answer. I ask people, what do you lose? Like if they're like, well, we don't need to talk about trans people, but they're people. And because they're people and we live under an oppressive system, this system is oppressing them. So how is not talking about that going to solve that problem? Well, we don't need to talk about it. I'm like, and I don't, my question is, what do you lose by talking about that? Are you afraid that if we talk about trans women being oppressed, that nobody's going to talk about you being oppressed? Is that what it is? Because we can fix that. Like, that's just a question of us having a more expanded and correct analysis. That's all. That only makes us stronger. When has that ever made us weaker? But I truly believe that that's the core of a lot of this is if this becomes something in the forefront, then I will no longer be in the forefront. This is certainly true if you look at white supremacy, no question. If you listen to what Europeans, white people are saying, that's exactly what they're saying. I'm not getting something. I'm not getting it. When you bring up white supremacy, they immediately center themselves. They don't even, it's like automatic remote control. But what about me? You know, when you talk about anyone that did work around the $15 an hour wage movement, anyone that did that, you know that when you talk to people about that, first thing they said is that, well, what about me? I have to work 3 jobs. I don't make da-da-da. This is, again, that scarcity concept. And they feel like because they believe in that scarcity concept, if they're not centered, they won't get what they deserve. But what we have to do is help people understand that there is more than, you're not going to lose anything. It'll make your standing better to address all forms. Because as long as there are people oppressed, your liberation is on shaky ground. You can't have strong liberation, grounded liberation, and there are people oppressed while you're trying to get free. That's not a strong foundation. That's not a stable foundation. The only stable foundation is addressing the oppression that everyone experiences. And so that's what we have to do. We have to be able to convince people that that's the road to freedom and forward progress, and get people out of this backward scarcity fueled mindset where people think that if they talk about other people's oppression, they're going to lose. So you see this everywhere. You know, I see all these dumb, well, the Asian people got a hate bill and we got a holiday talking about Juneteenth. Well, first off, like, who out here really believes that this legislation being passed is going to protect Asian people? And on top of that, what African out here is so dumb that you believe that even if they pass a bill protecting you, that that's really what's going to happen? Now, all of a sudden, because they passed a piece of paper, you telling me that you're so insane in the membrane that you believe that because these crooks and thugs who make their living off of exploiting your people, now that they passed this dumb piece of paper, now all of a sudden the police now are going to be all concerned about justice for you and are going to ensure that you never have to suffer any inequity again in life? Do you really believe that? Do you really think that makes a difference? The only way you're going to have justice is when you organize and create it. The only way Asian people are going to have justice is when they organize. That's not going to come from the capitalist system passing a bill. But again, this is the scarcity thing. Well, they got something that we should have got. So because we didn't get what we should have got, I'm going to oppose it against them. What I mean, that's like all that. That's what that makes me think of is the child on the playground that doesn't get their way, so they take their toys and leave. What an infantile and immature way to live life. I mean, you should be ashamed of yourself if you believe that. You really should. Grow up, and realize that our strength lies in unity. And unity means all of us. It means nothing except all of us. And so we have to normalize eradicating these blind spots in our vision for justice. I mean, people are well versed on the evils of white supremacy, but when you talk about patriarchy or homophobia or something like there's an oblivion, then you're not for justice. All you are is for making your personal situation better. You cannot convince me that you're for justice, because justice in the very definition of the word means that you want a righteous reality for everybody. You can't have justice for some people and other people don't have it. That's like making a pie with sugar, and then you can't take the sugar out of the pie. It's a part of the whole fabric of that object. And that's what justice is. You can't have, like Dr. King said, you can't have it some places and not have it other places. Anybody who believes that is just I don't know what to say. I mean, you're not serious about understanding it. Or, you know, one thing we have to talk about, and we will talk about this in a couple of weeks, is that a lot of people aren't strong with being able to read. I mean, that's just real, you all. People don't have strong reading skills, and they don't have it because they don't do it that often. And no one is going to come and say, you know what, I'm not really good at reading. People should do that. We can help you learn how to get better at it, and you need to get better at it, but people don't know how to do that. So instead, they create all this subterfuge when you could tell talking to them, if you know better, they haven't read anything and aren't going to read anything because they don't know how to. And that's a big part of this problem. We have to correct this glorification of ignorance and this concept that everybody has a right to an opinion. No, you don't. To me, you don't have a right to an opinion unless you know what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about. I ain't listening to you. And anybody that does is a fool. You listen to somebody just because they can bump their gums. That's nonsense. I'm not, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not listening to you because you're not making any sense. You know, Shukura and I have a joke. We talk all the time, and she'll say, "Daddy, did you hear me?" And I'm like, "You ain't talking about nothing." And, I'm listening to her, but that's just our joke. But I tell other people that, and I mean it. Like, did you hear as a man of the day? Did you hear what I said? I said, no, I'm not listening to you. I disconnected. You're not talking about nothing. That's a waste. I don't know how long I have to live on the earth. And certainly the last thing I want to do if I happen to die right now is be listening to your nonsense. So no, I'm not listening to that. So we got to correct that problem. That's definitely a necessity. And so the things that we should do to do that, big surprise, is that we have to commit again to this question of organization, because the question of organization is the solution to this problem. Because if we have people engaged in organizing processes and they have political education as a part of that process, then we can begin to study these issues and get a proper understanding of them and engage in work that can wipe out the practices of oppression that these institutionalized systems of oppression rely on to function and exist. But if you're not doing that, then all we have is millions of individuals who have bourgeoisie idealistic concepts of truth and justice. And so we just come into this constant struggle where we're engaged in these individualistic interpretations of everything and we can't move forward. That's the problem we have now. We've got to be able to struggle to get some understanding on these things based on science and study, because the information is out there. So your organization has to have an anti-patriarchy focus. You got to get that. If you don't have it, then you're not doing it right. You got to get that. That's essential, because patriarchy, you cannot be for justice and not have a position on patriarchy. That's absurd. You got to be able to understand that wiping out patriarchy, even if you're a man like me, is a central and primary part of my work. It has to be, because until the most oppressed sectors of society are liberated, then my liberation is not safe. It's never safe under those conditions. So I have to fight harder to eradicate patriarchy than anybody, because I have to fight to do that, because, or at least as hard as I possibly can, because that's the only way to protect my freedom. That's what we got to get people to understand. It's not a scarcity thing. It's about how we strategically come together to win. That's what we got to do. And we have to have work projects along with the political education that are designated for men to do anti-patriarchy work. You know, one of the things we did when I was a few years ago, there was a women's group that came and they asked for support. They wanted to leaflet downtown, and they were walking by a lot of bars and places, and they were having a problem with men coming out and harassing them. And they wanted support. It's not that they couldn't fight for themselves, but they wanted to focus on talking to women identifying non-gender people, and they, you know, were not able to do this because of all these drunk men coming out doing that. So they asked us, so, you know, we would go out and we did not interfere with any of the wonderful work they were doing. But when guys would come around and try, we would just go to the guy and tell them to get to stepping. And if they didn't get to stepping, then we would deal with them accordingly. And so that's just one example. That's probably not even the best example, but we got to get men engaged in work to support the struggle against patriarchy. And one of the ways that I personally do that now is that in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we have an anti-patriarchy task force. And because we see our Pan-African work as designed to impact 2 billion African people worldwide, our first step is to ingrain the APRP with an anti-patriarchy framework and foundation, with all the things we're talking about. So we do a tremendous amount of work that's designed to do that. And I make sure that that work is a priority. I got a lot of work in the APRP, but I make sure that work is a priority. And part of that work is the book I produce. That's why anti-patriarchy is a part of the title, because all the work I'm doing to help people organize, it has to center anti-patriarchy. So I'm constantly talking about that, and and constantly helping people learn how to organize against it. And that's a critical part of the work, you all. And then men have to have, in the course of doing that, the courage and integrity to step up. We can't be lazy intellectually. We can't be cowardly. We have to step up and say this is wrong. And we want to create a world where this does not exist. And we have to understand, to do that, we have to understand that we don't benefit by women identifying people, non-gender binary people being oppressed. We don't benefit by trying to diminish their oppression and situate it beneath our own oppression. We don't benefit by doing any of those foolish things. The only thing that will help us benefit is by strengthening the most oppressed sector of humanity. And that is women and women identifying people and non-gender binary people. The African non-gender binary people are the most oppressed people on earth. The African trans people are the most oppressed people on earth. I don't lose anything by saying that. It makes me stronger. It makes our movement stronger to recognize that and organize around that. And anybody that doesn't understand that is just not interested in our collective liberation. That's just all there is to it. And a lot of people just want to feel better about oppression. So they're not really interested in that. But for those that are interested in that, that's how we have to look at it. And we have to normalize doing what's right instead of what's easiest. So many people just want to get through without conflict, just make it through. That's why you're not worth anything as a human being. Because when at some point in your life, it's going to come to a point where you have to stand on principle and you don't know how to do that. So you fail miserably. That's why that happens. You have to practice that. And the way you do it is standing up for things that are right, no matter what the consequences. You do that a few times, then you will have no problem doing that. And the challenges you have that seem so insurmountable will not be nearly as difficult. The boss you have that's bullying you and picking on you will not be nearly as difficult to deal with. None of these problems will be, because now you stand on principle. And when you do that, people have to respect you. And when people have to respect you, they deal with you in a totally different way than when you just somebody that just mumbles along and doesn't want to deal with any conflict, never wanted to speak out. No, nobody respects anybody like that. That's why you have the problems you have. So your life will be a lot easier when you learn how to stand up for what's right and not be afraid to do that. So these are all the ways we do all these things. We create a culture where patriarchy is not able to function on nearly the level it functions on today. And when we do that, we're on the pathway, especially when we do the work, to eliminating it. And that's how we get free, you all, each and every one of us. So again, we reiterate, join an organization, build your organization. Don't let yourself get discouraged. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to have challenges in the organization. If you expect everything to go along smoothly, then you're watching some fantasy show on television. It's going to be difficult. And your job is to figure out how to work through the difficulty, not to give up, throw your hands up after 5 minutes. Well, I don't know, I can't deal with that anymore. I'm going to go get high or get drunk or just go play basketball or just not deal with it anymore. Then you weren't serious from the jump. It's gonna be difficult. You're gonna have to prepare yourself for that. That's an important part of it. And we have a ton of resources on the left there. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party when I ask you to do that. aprp-intl.org. Go there. You get an orientation video. You can find out more. Do that. Go to abetterworld.me. I just wrote this morning an article about Kwame Ture, inspired by the wonderful thoughts of him in the tribute this morning, and wrote an article about how the police lies and how they try to steal, discredit his legacy. So you can read that now at abetterworld.me, and I hope to also get it published on our Hood Communist site. And I'm an editor for Hood Communist with my comrades, Erica and Onyesamu and Salifu and Ghazi. So go on there and read Hood Communist. It's a wonderful site with outstanding articles from all sorts of revolutionaries, not just us, because I don't like any of them people. Well, then there's all kind of other people you can read on there. So do that, okay? And then you should go to abetterworld.me and donate. We have a lot of expenses. We need your help, so please help us. We appreciate it. And the AAPRP has a number of podcasts. The Pantula podcast every Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Forward Ever podcast on It's available to you. You can listen to that one as well. The Revolutionary African Women are doing one. They just did one yesterday, I believe, and you can listen to that. You can go back and listen to it. And the weekly APRP New Mexico broadcast, I need to correct that. It's actually 12 noon Mountain Time. And obviously, we're here every Sunday, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific Time. We invite you next week to come to us. July 4th, we're going to be talking about the deep psychology of American identity and why the 4th of July is a damn lie. So come with us. If you don't want to deal with all that nonsense they're going to be throwing at you next Sunday, tell your friends to come here, and we're going to have church around how the 4th of July is a damn lie. So come and join us next Sunday. We ask you to continue to buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8 paperback, $5 digital. We're using the funds for mutual aid and to finance our work. We appreciate you. We're glad you joined us on this Sunday. Please do all of these things. Support independent revolutionary African organization. If you don't, y'all talk about support Black business, but you don't support the people fighting for you. You know, we're fighting for you. So help us, donate something, even if it's just $1. Contribute to our work so we can continue it. Especially if you're not doing it, least you could do is use the money you're earning from the job you got because of our people's struggle to support our people's struggle. That's the least you can do. Join organizations, read these sources here, participate in these podcasts, buy the book. Be back next Sunday. Forward ever, backwards never. White supremacy, got to go. Patriarchy, smash it, got to go. Capitalism, you already know, it's got to go. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening. We will see you next week.